Have you ever wondered what would happen if you somehow survived getting engulfed by a black hole? I certainly have, and like everyone else, I could never come up with a concrete answer. Black holes are kinda scary when you think about them. Their gravitational pull is so strong that light itself cannot even escape its grasp. They are so destructive and space warping, and the thing that makes it scary is that we truly know nothing about them. All we really have is our observations and theories. As far as observations go, we finally managed to get a publishable photo of a said black hole released earlier this year on April 10th, 2019. In the photo, you can see the photon capture zone of the event horizon, which is basically the visible range of gravitational manipulation towards the black hole. Before I go any further, let me introduce myself. My name is Carter Lux. It's ironic that my last name is Lux, because once I tell you what I know, you will realize just how unlucky I really am. I'm 21 and work as a longshoreman. It's a job where you work at a harbor where you import and export shipping freight. You would know what I'm talking about if you live near or in a city by the ocean. The area with all the cranes and containers. That's where I work. This is why a lot of people would consider me lucky, I guess. Being so young and getting a hard to obtain job like that. It's only possible because I come from a line of longshoremen, so I kinda just instantly got the job. It's just how the world works sometimes. I'm just happy I was on the positive side of it for a change, and I try to be as humble as I can about it. I was just a normal young adult, like everyone else. Just without the worry about finding a successful job. I just had to worry about keeping it. I might have inherited the job, but now it's up to me to maintain it, or they will have no problem firing me for someone more experienced to step in. Like most young adults, I try to relax a little from time to time with doing activities like hiking, going to bars, or mainly smoking marijuana with some good friends of mine, Johnny, Derek, and James. They were friends of mine since elementary school, and we have been basically inseparable ever since we started hanging out at recess. Let me get back to the main story, now that I have given you a little background. I'm sure you're all here for the interesting parts, not my life story. I still need to explain this for everything to make sense. First off, I do not want to come off as the one with the answers. As I just explained, I was a normal person just like everyone else. I never worked at NASA or SpaceX. I never really held much of an interest for sciences in that particular field anyways. To be even more honest, I never really cared about space or things that people think about in a scientific way in general. I would go for a more philosophical approach to things. If you couldn't already tell, I was a typical curious stoner whenever I wasn't on the job. Just smoking away and wondering about the universe spiritually. Casually discussing theories with my friends while we were hotboxing my car was a usual thing we would do after our work shifts. One particular time, we got into a deep conversation about the universe. It started with Derek taking a bong rip, exhaling slowly, and saying, "Yo, what if some scientist made a black hole by accident and destroyed everything?" I turned over, stoned out of my mind, and said, "I guess we will be destroyed then." Derek's what ifs were always the ones that were more like a bad scenario than an actual what if, leaving virtually no other option than what he said as the answer. "What about you, Johnny?" Derek looked over to the backseat. Johnny was passed out. This shit was some of the most potent marijuana we have smoked in a while. The two main reasons why it was so potent were that due to my newly inherited job, I was able to get one of the most expensive eighths of bud at a brand new marijuana store that opened up nearby. And two, we all took a 1-week tea break. A tea break is when you stop smoking weed for a certain amount of time and bring down your tolerance so you can get higher and smoke less. And let me tell you, it felt like it was our first time again. James, said Derek, not wanting to bother with waking Johnny up. James looked over to Derek and I, looking seemingly more sober than the rest of us. I have a feeling he cheated a little on the tea break. Well, it depends what's on the other side, James said, packing a bong rip. Fucking James, why'd you have to open up that fucking can of worms? I was intrigued the moment I heard James say those words. Now, that's a response I wasn't expecting. James was always the one to say something eye-opening or mind-blowing. Yeah, James, what do you mean? It depends on what's on the other side, Derek said with interest. We both looked at James as he pondered this question. He held up a finger for us to wait, as he was in the middle of smoking his bowl. After a couple of coughs, he said, Well, what do you guys think is on the other side of one? Usually, I get ticked off and make him answer the question, but the way he said it and the high I was feeling made me want to play along. Well, I think it's probably a huge ball of light and energy made up of all the stuff that gets sucked into it. James nodded and looked over at Derek. I don't know, bro. Nothing, I guess, because black holes just suck everything up and put it into some void inside it. James's look got slightly more intense toward Derek and said, Well, isn't space itself just a huge void? Derek and I just sat there looking at him. James did have a good point. I started to pack myself another bowl as I could feel my high starting to wear off, and this was a very interesting conversation I wanted to stay high for. After I smoked the bowl, I spoke. So, what do you mean, James? You're saying that inside of a black hole is a void? James laughed. I think that the other side of a black hole would be another dimension or realm, you know? Like a different reality or something. James really did know how to blow our minds. I don't know if it was the weed or not, but what James was saying sounded pretty plausible in the moment. Damn, James, I didn't really think of it like that. It's like an inaccessible wormhole or something, I said, my mind wandering around my thoughts. James looked impressed at my similar thinking. I think of it more as a one-way track to a different place. That is a good way to look at it, I said, taking in a breath of the hotbox. It was so smoky, it was almost hard to see each other at this point. James was looking out the window thoughtfully. I wonder if we will have the power or know-how to use black holes one day, or at least understand more about it, so I can really know if I'm right or wrong. I looked at James. Yeah, but I guess that's one of those questions we will probably never get an answer to. James stayed silent, but gave a slight nod, still looking thoughtful. That was 1 year ago. About 1 month after we had this conversation, James called Derek, Johnny and I, and told us to meet up at our usual smoke spot. This would have been normal if James didn't go missing after the black hole conversation we had. All three of us obviously agreed and went to the place to meet up. James must have been in some big trouble to up and leave like that, and then hit us back up a month later. Once we got to the spot, we saw James sitting there on the hood of his car, waving us over. We sprinted over to James, who had a weird smirk on his face. I wanted to slap the smug look of his face for making this situation and looking like it's a joke to him. Instead, I just yelled at him. James, what the fuck, man? Where the fuck have you been? Everybody has been searching for you. Derek got into James's face, his head turning a slight shade of red while trembling, and said, I should fuck you up right now, man. You just disappear and come back with a smile on your face like nothing's wrong. You do realize we were the last ones to see you, right? James's smirk faltered a little as he looked at Derek. And Derek slapped James's head while Johnny pulled him back. You have no idea how it is to be worried for your friend while everyone else around you thinks you're the one involved with their disappearance. Derek screamed, still being held back by Johnny. Alright, Derek, calm down. Let's let him explain himself before we do anything rash, said Johnny, pushing him back and giving him a stern look. Derek backed off, but was still pissed. Johnny might have been quiet, but when needed, he flies into action. He was also easily the strongest member of our group, so none of us wanted to fight him anyways. He looked like he was supposed to be a jock, but said nah, I like Wheatmore instead. Luckily, he was also one of the nicest people you could meet, unless you get on his bad side. Alright, fine. Let's hear it then, James. What was so important that you had to make us go through hell for a month? James looked at all of us and said, I think I have the answer to that one question. This made us all fall silent for a second. I leaned forward and grabbed James's shirt and said, are you trying to tell me that you went missing all because of some stupid conversation we had last month? My anger boiling to the tipping point. Johnny didn't try to stop me as James's response angered him as well. You better tell me something real convincing right now before I punch you in the face and drag you back to your families who's currently devastated over you being missing right now. Not fazed at all, James looked at us and said, it's easier if it tells you itself. Before I had the chance to think about what he said, everything around me turned blood red and all noise ceased. I saw Johnny and Derek both collectively freak out like me, but I couldn't hear a word they were saying. James looked like this has happened before and was used to this abnormal view of the world. The color of Derek and Johnny came back, and I could finally hear them as well. James was looking straight at me. The more I looked, I realized he was looking past me, not at me. When I turned around, I didn't know what was real anymore. I looked up and my mind started to slowly break, trying to understand what I was trying to focus on. The being had this type of Vantablack center and emitted an aura that made me feel numb. Vantablack is a black so dark that it almost seems like a void, darker than the shadows itself. This thing that was lurking behind me was easily 7 feet tall, and every time I tried to focus on what I assumed was its face, my mind would start to slip. It was the closest I have ever felt to losing my sanity. I don't understand why this thing provoked so much fear into my soul. It just seemed like a shadow. But every particle in my body screamed that it shouldn't exist. Just looking in its general direction brought up a primal urge to survive. But somehow I knew better not to try and run from this being. If its mere presence changes the fabric of reality around us, I don't want to know what it would do if I tried anything. What has James gotten us into now? Sorry for the delay. I needed to rest after that last post. I was going to try and describe the being that we encountered, but thinking too much on its form almost made me lose myself once again. Consider it a side effect from being around the thing. From this point on, I will refer to this being as the Shadow. Now, back to the encounter. I tried to rationalize what was happening around me, hoping that I didn't just go insane. I tried to move, but I couldn't move a muscle. I could only move my head around, and when I tried to shout, I realized I couldn't speak either, as air slipped out of my lips instead of words and screams. Derek, Johnny and I were all forced to our knees and pulled next to each other in a line by an invisible force while James walked over to the shadow side, looking at us with dead eyes. There was no sparkle in his eye, just an empty dull darkness. The thing floated over to us, and the closer it got, the hotter and heavier everything felt. I almost thought I was going to be burned from how much heat was being emitted from it. Once it was about 3 feet away from us, a thunderous deep voice that was so loud it instantly gave me a piercing headache boomed inside of my head. I could see it affected the others the same way because I could feel the tears and pain in their faces as they clenched their jaw muscles while squeezing their eyes shut.
You all wish to unlock the secret of the black hole. Some will not. Some already know.
James looked up at the shadow from this remark, seemingly unaffected by the heat and pressure, and then knelt down, just like us.
Some need to earn it. Some do not.
The shadow put an arm out, strange wisps of dark energy flowing off of the arm like smoke, and put its hand on James's head.
You have earned it.
What happened next was something I will never be able to get out of my head until I die. The area around James burst into this indigo blue flame-like energy and started to consume him. I watched as James started hollering in a way that I wish I could erase from my brain. His skin melted off like wax, and by the time it got to the bones, Johnny retched in disgust. It didn't stop there. By the time James was just a kneeling skeleton, and it seemed like everything was melted away from his body. The bones thickened and started to turn jet black. Long black hair started to jut out of his skull, anime style. The hair reminded me of Madara Uchiha from Naruto if he got reanimated without skin. I would have usually thought it was cool, but in this case, it was one of the most terrifying things I've ever witnessed. Somehow, he was still screaming, and I listened to his voice turn demonic and guttural while his form started to vibrate slightly. The sockets of James's eyes, which were melted away almost instantly from the burst of energy, started to glow a deep crimson red, while he started to turn his screams into fits of mad laughter.
I understand. I understand it all.
James screamed while seemingly increasing in height. By this point, he was standing next to the shadow again. 2 ram-like horns poking out of his skull, and some type of reddish, smoky substance covering his body like a robe. The thing that was once my friend looked over at us and said with a booming voice,
You are all insignificant pawns in the great game of gods. I know we have everything, but nothing. We will win and lose. Nobody truly understands.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My old friend, lower down to this knowledge-seeking monster. How could this even happen in the first place? All we did was smoke weed and talk about the universe, which is pretty much what 9 of 10 stoners usually do when they are high. So I just didn't get it. There must have been something that happened to James before we hung out for that last time. As I was thinking about how this came to be, I heard Derek spit out something that would have made me slap him if I wasn't paralyzed. Since you're God, and you know everything, then tell us what you know then. What happens after we die? And what was I before I was born? Oh yeah, and what's on the other side of a black hole? I wanted to know the answers to these questions too, but from what I just witnessed, I don't think the answers are comprehensible for the normal human mind, and I would have never asked him in the way he had if this thing really was God or something close to it. Realizing that we can speak now, I looked over at Derek and said, "Are you fucking kidding me, bro? This is not the time for this right now." Derek was about to reply when the shadow talked over him.
Derek, the messenger. I'm not God, but I will give you the answers you seek.
The shadow pointed at Derek, and within seconds, I started to see tears flow down his face. "Oh, I see." I couldn't tell what Derek was feeling. He seemed sad, but happy at the same time. "I see," Derek said again, tears flowing down his cheeks. He got calm and became distant, as if none of us were here, and seemed like he was in a type of meditation state. Johnny and I both tried calling his name, but he was ignoring us or not hearing us at all. The shadow looked over at Johnny. Its voice sounded slightly inquisitive as it said,
Johnny, the wild card. Your destiny is not set.
Johnny looked confused. Wild card? The shadow then looked over at me.
Carter, the righteous one. Your destiny is.
I was so lost and confused, I just stayed silent, scared to say something wrong.
Now, fulfill your destiny. Play your part.
The shadow looked over to what used to be James.
Come, Prophet. We have universes to explore.
And with that, a white flash blinded me, and by the time I opened my eyes, I found Derek still on his knees in an unresponsive state. And everyone else was gone. James, Johnny, and the shadow were nowhere to be seen. I pulled out my phone to find out that only 1 minute had passed since we came here to meet up with James. I don't fully understand what happened to me or the others, but I damn sure am gonna try and figure it out. I guess I'll start with going to James's place. There has to be a clue or something to alleviate my head. Once I was able to recover from the encounter, I tried to get Derek to his feet with no luck. I had no choice but to call his parents, who started to chew me out the moment they saw their son. I couldn't just leave him there like that, so I had to take a little heat from his parents. I obviously couldn't say what happened, because they would have had me in an asylum in a heartbeat. So I came up with a story that he took some acid from a shady dealer and he had a bad trip. They proceeded to chew me out some more and even threatened to call the police on me. But Derek's dad started to de-escalate the situation to my surprise. He looked at his son and said, "Look, Carter, as much as I want to punch you in the face while sending you and myself to jail, ultimately, this was Derek's choice." Derek's mom started to protest, but the dad held up a finger. "Honey, I know you're pissed, so am I, but we can take out our anger on this kid because our son made the wrong choice. Teenagers are naturally irresponsible." Derek's mom was still obviously pissed, but she respected her husband's words. She sighed and slightly nodded, avoiding eye contact with me. Derek's dad then looked me in the eyes intensely and said, "Don't think this means you're off the hook, Carter. If my son isn't normal by morning, you'll wish I punched you. You better hope it's just a bad trip. He was your friend, Carter. You should have at least tried to stop him from taking it. I'm disappointed in you." Even though it was Derek's dad, it still hit hard. Heck, both of Derek's parents were like my own at times. I spent many days of my childhood over at Derek's house, having sleepovers, and eating dinner with him was a normal thing. In a way, I looked up to Derek's parents like an aunt and uncle, like family. So, hearing those words hurt knowing what really happened. I guess I have to sacrifice a little bit of my reputation for now, until I can find some hard evidence to explain myself with. Lying wasn't the way I wanted to go, but I didn't see another way out of it. I tried to apologize, but they just walked away. The dad picking up Derek and presumably taking him to the hospital. I have to put my feelings aside for now, if I really want to save my friends. I need to figure out what and why this happened to James and how it involved Derek, Johnny, and I. Speaking of Johnny, I don't even know if he's alive. He was gone after the flash, and I highly doubt that anyone was going to go looking for him. Before you think I'm an ass, let me explain myself. Johnny has always been the enigma of our group. None of us has ever seen any of his family before, and we have learned over the years not to ask him about it. We started to assume he was adopted because since as far back as I remember, I have never seen his family or guardians before. He would always have the freedom to go out and do whatever, and he never seemed to have a curfew. It wasn't as bad as it sounds though. He wasn't the only kid with loose parents. As for his parents, all that meant to us is that we have one less set of parents to worry about. Johnny always said that we were family to him. I have to find him. I can't just lose all of my childhood friends like that. I made my way to James's house once I knew Derek's parents were gone. I pulled up to a small, one-story house that was in a secluded neighborhood on the end of a cul-de-sac. I was saddened to see our ultimate man cave looking so dilapidated and sketchy looking. The sketchiness was enhanced with the slowly darkening evening sky. It hasn't even been half a year yet, and it looked abandoned already. Police tape condemning the house. They stopped looking for clues after a damn week into James's disappearance. I never had any hope in my local PD anyways. From the beginning, they just wanted to write it off as a runaway, and it was James's family who kept pressing the issue. I started to look around the house for an entry point once I knew I wasn't going to be spotted. The front of the house was a no-go, so I made my way to the back, climbing over a 6-foot chain link fence and almost rolling my ankle on the landing. After another thorough scan for entry, I finally found a loose window that gave away after a few tugs and one quick upwards thrust. I crawled inside and cursed my clumsiness once again as I lost my footing trying to reach into the pitch black room. Something broke from the weight of my foot and I flew into the room, hitting my head on something hard. Once I was able to stand up, I fished out my phone and turned on the flashlight. I know, I should have done that earlier, but sometimes I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, and I was trying to be discreet outside. Once the light illuminated the room, I instantly figured out how I fell. I ended up breaking into the bathroom and I broke the towel rack by putting my foot on it for support and smacked my head on the side of the toilet on the way down. I'm just happy I didn't crack my head open. Not really knowing what to look for, I walked out of the bathroom and through the living room while lightly rubbing the now slowly developing bump on my head. Damn, those cops just trashed James's place looking for clues, and it seemed they had a little fun doing so because it looked more like a raid rather than an investigation. I walked over smashed plates and broken chairs and made my way to James's room. It was messy, but not as bad as the rest of the house at least. Either the cops were sloppy or we were extra cunning because in less than 1 minute I was sitting there with our community stash of weed. Our hidden bong danky and a big lighter I still had in my pocket. Yes, we named our bong danky, and yes, this is the time for a bong rip. I know you probably think I'm stupid, but honestly, fuck it. De-stress now and yell at me later. I need THC to calm my nerves right now, and I was lucky enough to remember about the stash. After I took about 3 rips, I was high and went to put all the paraphernalia away when I noticed a small shape in the corner of the stash pot. I reached in and pulled out a small black leather-bound journal. Now, this is what I was looking for. I opened up the journal and I looked at the first few pages, and they were covered in nothing but swirls and black circles and scribbles. I kept paging through until I noticed the pages becoming legible for once. The page I read went like this. Messier and messier this gets the more I try to understand. Look to the skies and open your eyes. Why did I have to be the only one to see it? If you're a Virgo, you might understand. Astrological to astronomical. Trillions of stars can make infinite constellations. Infinite, like a figure 8. Over and over again, and it never ends. Where is hell? And where is heaven? For in space, there is no descent or ascension. I might be onto something. I need my lucky number 7. We aren't alone on this floating rock. I will prove everyone wrong. The next page was a sketch of the shadow that was so detailed it gave me a headache. I was about to read the next page when I heard a sound from outside towards the open window. I put the journal in my pants, scared to lose the only evidence I have by simply having it fall out of my pocket and try to sneak out a different way. There was no way to really move around without making some type of noise. I really didn't want to explain myself if it was a cop or one of James's parents. The decision got made for me, to my horror, as I heard a voice call out to me. Carter Lux. How this random person knew my name, I wish I knew. I just stayed silent and hoped the guy might just leave. Another stupid thought from me, I know. A female voice called out this time. Carter, come out. We need to leave now before the police come. This is your only chance we are giving you. This was starting to sound like a horror movie unfolding in real life. First, supernatural beings, and now, all-knowing people. Why should I trust you? I said to the two unknown voices. I heard a small laugh, and then heard, because we knew you were here this whole time and decided to let our presence known, and I just tipped you off that the police are on their way to this location as we speak. The lady did have a point. Alright, I'm walking out, but then you both need to start explaining what the fuck is going on, deal? That's why we're here, buddy, the male voice said in a smug tone. I made my way to the window to see two figures in identical black and white suits staring back at me, sunglasses on, even though it was nighttime by this point. I really don't have another choice but to go along with them right now. The next time I get another chance to post, I will let you guys know how this goes. Wish me luck, guys, and thank you for your support.